to the computer. Hi, welcome back to the Truth About Child Loss podcast. This is the beginning of season 2, and I'm super excited. My name is Sam Pierce. I am one of the co-hosts. The other co-host is Ron Pierce, my husband. He's not joining us today, but you will get to hear from him again very soon. Today, we just wanted to welcome you to season 2. This is the first episode, and I wanted to update you on what we've been doing. It's been over a year since season 1 ended. We have been through pandemic or are going through pandemic, and it took us a little while to get back to it, but we've been busy at the Christian Jaden Project. So I wanted to bring on the show for season 2, episode number 1, Nicole Collins, who is a development person for the Christian Jaden Project. And if, in case you're wondering what the Christian Jaden Project is, well, the Truth About Child Loss is actually a podcast that sits under the Christian Jaden Project. And those that listened last season knows that Christian and Jaden are my twin boys that passed away. They were born at 21.6 weeks. And they had no chance of survival. And so our nonprofit, the Christian Jaden Project, which you can visit at thecjp.org, we put this nonprofit together to help other families like ours through grief and other programming. And the Truth About Child Loss is one of its projects. So without further ado, I just want to introduce Nichole Collins. Nicole, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself and what we're doing here today?
Well, hi, thank you for having me on the podcast today. So a little bit about myself. So my name is Nichole Collins. I've been working in the nonprofit sector for about a little 15 years now. So I specialize in fund development and strategic partnerships. But what my passion really is for helping small organizations grow, and not even necessarily organizations, but I got into this work because I truly believe that the answers to society's problems lie with the people who are inflicted, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we rely on foundations and like people with large dollars to solve the problems that are widespread, like hunger or homelessness, and we forget to go ask the people who are affected by this, like, what do you actually need, and what is it that we need to do so that we are actually doing what this sector is supposed to do, which is really to solve those problems and not necessarily triage them, which is what we see a lot. But that's probably for a different podcast, right?
We could talk all day about that.
Yeah. So one of the things I really like about working with Sam and Ron with the Christian Jaden Project is that these are two people who are right there with the problem. They get it. They not only because they lost their twins, Christian and Jaden, but also because when we're talking about child loss, we're talking a lot about systemic racism, right? Right. And so we're talking about how this actually affects Black families and why, and how did we get here, and what role did racism play? And that's only a story that can be told by someone who is Black, someone who has lost a child, and that's only, I believe, a problem that can be fixed by someone who is Black and has lost a child. You have to have those two things together in order to really get to the solution. So I'm here to help Sam and Ron really get that message out and really like hone in on like what do we need to do and what are the steps. I kind of see myself as more like a putting the ingredients together and whatever it may be coming from Ron and Sam, and I've been really enjoying working on this project.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. I just cannot believe how much we've gotten accomplished in such little time. So when would you say we actually began working together on this project?
You would probably say we began working together in maybe July of 2020.
That's exactly what I would say.
I would probably say maybe around November when you actually incorporated Christian Jaden Project. because I'm also one of Sam's clients with Renegade Soul, and she kept telling me she's going to do this nonprofit, and I'm like, okay. And to know Sam is also to know her journey, and to know Christian, and to know Jaden, and to know her entire story. So I don't feel like I feel like we've been talking about this, and we've been working on this, and she's been saying this nonprofit is coming, and she's been telling me about this work that she's been doing this entire probably since at least 2019, 2018. And it just so happened that in July it was go time.
It was go time. That's right. That's right. I can't thank you enough, because she's been a sounding board since before she came on board. Not just blurt stuff out, and she's in the middle of a set. What do you think of, you know? So in case y'all didn't know, I don't know if y'all knew this, but I'm also a personal trainer, and the name of that company is Renegade Soul. And so it sponsors the Christian Jaden Project. So you've heard the name before, you hear the commercials, but that's what I do. And that's not how I know Nicole, but that's how I've been talking to her all along about the Christian Jaden Project. So Nicole, we've known each other for a long time.
Mhm.
When you found out, we don't need to go into the details of how we met, right? But when you found out that we lost the twins, do you recall the moment that you actually found that out? I don't know if we've ever talked about that. Do you?
I don't think we definitely haven't talked about that. One of the things that I've always been so impressed with you and Ron is that your openness of your story. In
Mhm.
no way did you ever shy away from telling it. So I remember probably seeing you talk about it on social media.
Okay.
And I'm like, what happened? And just being able to follow the whole story, but as it unfolded.
Right.
And I remember not really knowing like what to say, like what to do, like what is actually happening here. I remember seeing you later at March of Dimes events
Yeah. Yeah.
and getting a little more of your story then. And it's like, okay. But I just remember not really knowing what to do with that information.
Right. Right. So we were very publicly pregnant. We were publicly married. All of our friends, was very deeply involved with us. And so social media, this was back in 2009. So, Facebook was jumping at that point. Everybody was getting on. And so we were very, very publicly pregnant with twins. People were following that journey. And so when I wound up in the hospital, people just knew, like, we didn't shy away from posting that, because people were looking for us. We were excited about these twins coming, and people were excited for us. And so when we wound up in the hospital, people did know. I did post it. I was very optimistic though. So I thought we would get through it. And when we lost, well, it was already public. So we just had to continue to share and let people know what had happened. And I'm really glad that we did, to be honest with you, because then when we got home, people could show up, people could send plants and things, and even the people that did not know what to say or do could still engage in social media. They didn't have to be in person, you know what I mean? It just social media makes it way easier to just send a quick message or post on someone's timeline. And so that's just how it went. And so that's why when she says, oh, I think I saw it on social media, we were very publicly pregnant, and so we very publicly lost. Um, and I don't know if that was devastating. I probably should ask Ron his opinion about that. Was that a devastating piece of it? Could we not just lose in private? But I mean, I was almost 5 months pregnant, so I was out to here pregnant. So, I mean, if I show up and there are no babies, people are going to know anyway. So, yeah. So I appreciate that. That was one that I just kind of sprung on her. We've never talked about it. And so you knew from the beginning, because we were social media friends. Nicole is my sorority sister. So we've been friends for a very, very long time, since before I married Ron. And in fact, I think you were around right after I met him, basically. We were just boyfriend and girlfriend. So
Yeah, I don't even think I knew that y'all dated. I think I just were one day. And I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
right. Because we wasn't in social media back then. By the time we joined social media, we were already getting married. So, whew, thank God. So anyway, I'm so thankful of all the things we could do without social media. But social media is an excellent tool. Again, we were able to share our story through social media, and most of our friends could find out and act accordingly. However you were going to interact with us at that point was just okay at that point. So you find out that we are losing twins, and we get pregnant with another set of twins. Do you have any thoughts at all?
So this is probably gonna sound really bad, but I knew you had a set of twins, and then you had another set of twins, and it took me a minute to like,
Okay.
these are not the same twins. And that's why I said this is gonna sound bad. Because when you're following somebody in social media, and at that point I think I was real ghost. Like I just was just not like talking to much of anyone at that point. So I'm
Mhm.
following most people through social media, but like you don't get the whole glimpse of their story, right? You just get
Right.
what's coming through your timeline. And so I'm like, okay, she was pregnant. And then okay, I thought she lost these twins, but she's pregnant again. There's some other twins. So now I'm trying to count the months, right?
Right.
But, so once I got past that, I was just like, okay. And I don't think it dawned on me that you still have the pain of the other loss.
Yeah.
Because when we're looking, again, we only get what we see in social media, right? And so you're seeing a new thing. And social media makes you feel like things have like it's a whole new life. Like you're not a whole person. You're only what you are in the moment of that post.
Yeah.
And so I remember them being like, that's cool. And being happy for you, Iran. But I didn't realize that that the grief was still there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Because social media is like, you hide everything through social media. You only put out what you want to put out, right? And so fast forward to 2020, and now, well, really 2018, 19, I'm talking to you about the Christian Jaden Project. The second set of twins are here. They are just everywhere. But you see me working, because before we started the Christian Jaden Project, I was still working in child loss, doing other work for other committees, and just very active in the community. I worked for the March of Dimes for a little while, for about 5 years actually. And so we saw each other quite a bit through Stork's Nest, through, Zeta events, through the March of Dimes, March for Babies, those types of things. And so we fast forward to the Christian Jaden Project, and I'm starting to talk to you. And what are your thoughts? You're like, what? Wait, what happened? What are your thoughts when I start spitting it to you?
I feel like I had to catch up like with your entire life. Like I was like, Sam has over here lived like an entire life. But I think at that point I started seeing you talk more about your loss and more about grief, especially around the anniversaries of Christian Jaden's birth. And I would and so I wasn't like shocked, but
Mhm.
the level at which you were engaged in the conversation, I found that so intriguing.
Okay.
Because you could have just left it at, your story,
Mhm.
but you did. And I also saw your weight loss journey, right? So I saw your
Mhm.
health journey along the way too. And I never connected the two until I started talking to you and you talk more about that. But I just kept wanting to learn more and more and more. And then to find out how engaged you were in this, you speaking on panels, you leading committees, you putting on events. I was like, she is like the spokesperson for this thing, and she's doing all of this. And then, I get to ask other people. I'm like, did y'all know this is a thing? And I'm like, and no one knows.
Right. Yeah. And so Christian and Jaden Project is born, and I got it incorporated. And now I'm like, okay, I need to bring you on board so that, we can get some money going so that we could do some projects. And so you come on board and officially in July. And now we're doing these meetings, and you're now having to talk to me and learn what I want to do with CJP. And you're like blown away, because once I start talking, I just go and go and go and go. And I just wonder what your notepad looks like sometimes, because I'll just see you writing like I can't even keep up. So I start spitting things at you about what I want to do. How did you separate everything and get everything together?
That's a good question. So I almost feel like that's like my superpower. Like I'm really good at like people brain dumping things on me and saying, okay, well, this is how we go from A to B. Again, a lot of it wasn't new. I think one of the things I didn't realize was that you have so much you want to do.
Oh,
and so
then
it
there's
was
that.
so it was really the first thing to do was just to get so clear on your why. And so I don't know if you remember this. I said, why did you name the nonprofit Christian and Jaden? And I think you said, no one's ever asked. Like you had to think about it for a second.
Right. Like, what are you talking about? Why?
And what you told me is that you wanted people to say their names.
Yes.
And I remember we were walking through the Metro Park. So I remember coming home having to write all this stuff down that I digested from this 4-mile walk.
It was 5 miles. It was 5 miles.
And I've held that the entire time.
Yeah.
That you wanted people to say their names, and building that into making sure that they have a legacy, and also taking what is your lived experience and saying what is it that you're saying that you want for other people, that you want for other families. You talk a lot about the family healing, which is a slightly different conversation than talking about why do we have so many Black infants not making it to their first birthday? Why do we have so many Black infants that are dying? Yeah. And it's one conversation, but it definitely is 2 parts. And a lot of times, we're on the front end, we're like, well, we have to make sure, this never happens again. But you're on this other end where you're like, this happened. This real thing happened, and it's happening to a lot of people, and we're not okay.
Yeah. And those are facts. Yeah.
And once, just to be able to trim that out, then it made your programming a lot easier to say, well, what are we talking about? What are we doing? And so that we're very focused and saying that we are helping grieving families. And I love how you put it, we're wrapping loving arms around them.
Yeah.
Because you can see that, you can feel that, you know what that looks like. And you can talk about like, these are the things that people did for me that were great. Like even from the type of like not giving flowers, but giving you a plant.
Yeah.
Down to these very small details, but they're important, right? And it's only something that you would know as someone who went through this. But that's not necessarily going to be part of the conversation if we're just talking about how do we prevent, more infants from dying.
Yeah. Yeah. And Nicole has excellently just teased out everything that I've said. I'm pretty sure every single time we talk, I probably give her about at least another program that we could be doing, if not 2 or 3, and she's like, whoa, let's wait a minute on that. Like we get, okay, maybe 2022, And I'm just spitting out things that, because I am very, very passionate about about it all. Like, it's just so much in child loss, and being able to keep your family together after loss, So since the last episode, which was in January of 2020, what I've realized is that since then, I've gone through the grief recovery method certification. Um, Actually, I went through grief recovery first, and then went through the certification. And so it was like a double whammy. You go through it, it hits you, it slaps you, and then you learn how to do it again. And so it hits you and slaps you from a different angle. And what I've learned is that so much grief is compounded, so that by the time you are of childbearing age, you've gone through so much grief in your life, and you might not have handled it correctly, chances are, because you didn't realize it was grief. And so by the time you lose babies, it's so compounded that it could literally be the end of you if you don't take care of yourself. And so since January 9th of 2020, I've since lost my dad. He died in March of 2020. The grief recovery certification classes was right after his death. And so it was really hard to go through that. And I thought that the death of Christian and Jaden was the end of me until dad died. And so it's just compounded on grief on top of grief on top of grief. And so, we've taken a lot of time off from the podcast itself, but it was great healing time and great planning time. And so, and I'm glad that, we had the time, because we were able to make some real plans for the podcast, for CJP, for it all. So I'm going to open up this floor to Nicole to talk a little bit about some of the things that we did specifically for the Truth About Child Loss podcast. So take it away.
Well, so we actually did a little crowdfunding. So she was like, all right, I'm ready. July, I'm ready. I'm like, let's go. I'm like, well, okay, well, let's go. What's the first thing we can do? Well, we can raise some money real quick.
Uh-huh.
And I always try to remind Sam how amazing she is.
Aww,
I'm
always like, what are you talking about?
like, she really has no idea, like, how amazing she is, like how many people really love her and want to love on her, and how many people care about this issue and they're literally looking for ways to really like support and help and just be there, or even just how much Sam has poured into somebody else and people are looking for opportunities to pour back in, right? So I said, well, let's do this crowdfunding campaign, and trying to put everything also together. So there's the podcast and doing the season 2, but there's also this very important piece of Christian Jaden project where we have to tell the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I am surprised every time we go into a conversation with a group of people, and we're, Black people, or people that are working with Black people,
Mm-hmm.
people who are working in neighborhoods who have extremely high infant mortality rates.
Yeah.
And you tell your story and they're like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And
I'm really surprised at that too. Yeah.
They just don't know. They say, I didn't know that this was happening, or that this was an issue, or that the infant mortality rate was so high for Black babies. I didn't know that. But then in that same conversation, we also hear, I lost my child.
Right.
My sister lost. There's always someone that is very close to the person who also lost, which is telling us that this is something that's affecting all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're having these conversations, but there's no space for the conversation to happen. So we have all these people who are having the same experience, who are experiencing grief, who are losing children, and don't really know why, other than what the doctor, is saying, the medical reasons, but not the underlying stress or or how racism plays a part in it, not even knowing that it's a higher rate for them, right?
Mhm.
They don't know any of this. And so we have to have that conversation. And I
Yeah.
think in one of our last talks, we said we have to get people comfortable talking about dead babies.
Oh, did you say it? You
I
said it.
said it, including myself. Like I've been practicing because I said I have to get comfortable saying dead babies
Yeah.
because that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. And it was Nicole. I didn't realize how harsh I was sounding saying it until Nicole stopped me and she said, "Every time you say dead babies, I pause." And I'm like, "Really?" Because it's my life. Like I have to deal with having dead babies. And that includes miscarried babies because we've also miscarried. So just because they weren't fully formed babies, still babies, And so that's, I mean, if we name it and we say it and we normalize so that we aren't numb to the fact that we are actually talking about dead babies, I think maybe we can get somewhere. So I'm so proud that she even said it because every time she looks at me like, oh my goodness. It's like, sorry, Nicole.
No, it's okay. I'm like, you're really talking about dead babies. We're not talking about miscarriage. We're not talking about child loss. Those are very nice and comfortable words.
Yeah,
When we come down to it, we are talking about people's dead babies.
right.
And we have to say it just like that because people need the space to be able to talk about
Yeah.
these children that were in their life. I think another thing you said was that they lived, wasn't long, but
Hmm.
they did live.
That's right.
They lived inside you for 5 months.
Right.
They lived. And we can't to not say that or to not mention it and then to have this child that you can never talk about
Hmm.
because there's no space to talk about it, right? And then to know that someone else is like feeling something or maybe going through something similar and you don't really know who else to talk about it with, right? And so we have to be in our communities and we have to be able to have these conversations so that people can really get the support that they need.
Yeah.
But we can't talk about it. We can't fix an issue. We can't solve an issue that we're not talking about. So even if we go, to the front end and say, okay, let's figure out how do we get this infant mortality rate under control. We can't have that conversation. We can't do that without people knowing that it's out of control, that it is high. And we can't do that if we're not talking about the fact that our babies are dying.
Right.
And
Right.
so we wanted to see if we could pair the podcast along with some community dialogue. So we're doing this crowdfunding. We got a little grant money, got a little sponsorship so to make the gift a little larger, and we were able to raise about $6,000
Yep.
to be able to go into the Collinwood neighborhood, which is the neighborhood with the highest infant mortality rate in Cleveland.
And it also happens to be the neighborhood that I live in Cleveland. So,
Right. And to be able to do this community discussion where we're not talking to the doctors, we're not talking to the social workers or the people, the executive directors and program directors of the nonprofits. We are talking to people
right.
so that people will know that there is something that's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's also some help and there's some support. Like you don't have to be alone. And so we're going to, what are we doing? We're going to end up doing that first showing of the film Toxic. And if you haven't seen it, come to our community showing.
That's right. That's right.
So you can see it and walk through a Black woman who is pregnant and walk through her day.
That's right. So let's talk about that for like a half a second, a little bit more than a half a second. So I sat on a committee called the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Committee, PAIL for short. So when you hear me say PAIL, that's the Pregnancy and Infant Loss Committee. One of the projects that we did is to produce this film called Toxic, a Black woman's story. This story, it follows a Black woman and her family The husband and wife are professionals. That was very important. And they also have an older child. And she's pregnant, and it goes through some microaggressions that Black women go through every single day, on the job, in the stores, everywhere. Just microaggressions that lead into a stressful enough situation that she delivers the baby early, and all of the things that go on around that, right? It includes like some attempt on her part of self-care, and a society that is going through racial turmoil, you know, a lot like what we're looking at today, right? So this is a very important film. It's about 30 minutes long, and it's very excellently done, if I must say so myself. Um, it was done by Stimuli Films, Devin Collins. And when we do this airing, this showing, that was a large part of the $6,000 grant. I'm sorry, the well, is crowdsourcing and a grant. It's a very large part of that is to have that film be aired, and then we have a discussion around it, and it'd be a podcast episode. So I'm really, really excited about that, because one of the episodes for this season will be that. And I can't wait. I can't wait to get, you know, the people in the room, and to get the people on the panel discussing what is happening in this film. So, anything you want to add to that I just said?
No, I think that covered it. I've seen the film maybe 3 or 4 times now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a 30-minute film. There's just so much in it. I see something new each and every time.
Yeah.
And I have not lost a child. I have a child. She actually just came in here trying to get an iPad. But but there are so many things in her story that I see in mine.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the great things about the film, that is so relatable, but it's also one of the things that hurt the most.
Right.
That is so relatable. You're like, yes. And tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to live that life.
Exactly. Exactly. And the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, and it'll never change until we start having this conversation. Yeah. So then what else is happening in the world of Christian Jaden Project?
We're Christian Jaden Project. So we have the podcast. We're starting season 2. We have the community showings. We have the grief recovery groups that we're starting this year. So we have 8 weeks. Sam is certified, and we're going to take a couple groups of people through these classes. We were lucky enough to be able to partner with Euclid Hospital to support on the space. So we have great space to do it. We want to make sure that we keep doing things there as well. And then we just have this long list of things that I don't know how we're going to get to it, but it's all about it's all really about creating the space. We don't want to just do one show. We don't want to just do one grief recovery group. Our goal really is to take the communities with the highest infant mortality rates and start there, and make sure that we are present in all of those communities. But it's also making sure that we aren't just talking at people, that we're providing, that we're actually getting this message out, and we are doing that wraparound, right? So we've talked about having a retreat where you could go, and we would rent some hotel rooms, and we're just going to have a whole grief recovery retreat, right?
Yeah.
Talk about doing a magazine.
I dream big. What do you want from me?
Yes. Magazines. What did you want to do? Oh, a show.
Yeah. Like TED Talk type shows. Yeah, just to
TED Talk, and it's the sky is really the limit with Sam. But what I like are the things that we start local first, right? Everything starts local, and everything starts with community. And we don't build faster in the community. So even with the toxic film, it's actually done in partnership with the Commonwealth Development Corporation.
Right.
And so they're helping us get this messaging out, helping us find space and things like that as well, because we want to make sure that we are indeed reaching people. One of the the ideas that I'm really excited about is really probably the simplest thing, and it's giving the grief packages.
Yes. Yes.
And so we always, when people, you're talking about people who've lost a child, and you probably had a baby shower, you got all this baby stuff around you now. And sometimes we forget that you need that same type of showering and
Yeah,
love
that's right.
on the
Right.
other end. And so to be able to provide those families with the package that has a plant, not flowers.
That's right. Because the plant will continue to live if you take care of it. So yeah.
Yeah. And just whatever else, maybe a candle in there.
Hmm.
Something with, if they, if their children had names, we'll put there's something with their name in there. Maybe it's like a blanket or something, but something that, one, we're going back to what we started with. We want to make sure that we're saying their names
That's right. That's
because
right.
they lived, and we're and acknowledging that you are having an experience, by acknowledging that you have children.
Yeah.
No, they're not on this earth anymore. But
Yeah.
you had children. You
The
had children.
question is, how many children do you have, Sam? And the answer is always, well, I have 3 living children. I've given birth to 5 live children. I've miscarried one, but I have 3 living children. And that's always the answer. I never sidestep it. I never, try to sugarcoat it. I just tell them what it is, and that's just what it is. And I always say Christian and Jaden's name. So um, there are people in the world, and I realize this, especially working with the Pale Committee, which I have to, we have to backtrack for political reasons, and say that the Pale Committee was a committee under First Year Cleveland. So I just need to make sure I say that. But sitting on the Pale Committee, I learned quickly that there are people that have lost children that never speak about it and don't consider themselves a parent. And so, even though I consider them a parent, they don't consider themselves a parent. And you have to be sensitive about that too. But there are people that show up to the Wave of Light, which is the candle lighting ceremony every October, that never named their baby because maybe they miscarried and didn't think of a name at that point, or um, just didn't have the opportunity to name them. And we never give them a candle that just says, sometimes they'll put in like, first trimester miscarriage. And it's like, I'm not putting that on a candle. So it'll be baby, whatever your last name is. So for my case, my miscarried baby is baby Pierce. So we have a candle for Christian, a candle for Jaden, and then a candle for baby Pierce. It's very important to me though that like Nicole said, that we say their names and acknowledge these babies, because once we begin to normalize that it's okay to acknowledge the baby or babies, then people begin to loosen up a little bit around the discussion around a dead baby, and then we can begin to heal at that point. Because if we've swept it under the rug for 20, 30 years, it's gonna pop up. It's gonna pop up at some point. I remember we were in a support group. I think it was our photography support group over at Cornerstone of Hope. Um, and this was an open group, so it was all types of losses. Ours was child loss, but other people had lost grown children, other people had lost spouses, other people had, it was an open group. And so when we started talking about losing Christian and Jaden and going to the Wave of Light, the Wave of Light was coming up that year, so we were approaching it. So this was before October, and there was a lady in there. She was grieving the loss of her husband, and they had lost a baby 30 years earlier. And it opened up so many wounds for her because she never dealt with it. You were never allowed to speak about it at that time. There was not even a burial site, nothing about, this baby was closed for her. And yeah, 30 years ago, it's gonna pop up at some point if we don't normalize saying their names, acknowledging the fact that, yeah, I had a baby and the baby died. And it just happened. It is what it is. And how do I heal from it? And I need my community support and healing, because we do. It takes a whole village to raise kids, but also to raise adults, because we are just small children trying to heal from stuff that happened to us a long time ago. Right? So, yeah, I think if we can normalize, that was a whole soapbox, and I'm sorry, y'all, but
Well, that was good stuff. It made me think about our conversation about, I forget how you put it, but how this you say your child loss journey started with your mother.
oh yes, we did talk about that. We talked
Yeah.
about trajectory,
Yeah.
the life course perspective. Yeah.
And I think about that. I think about that conversation. I think about a lot of our conversations a lot. They're so rich. There's so much in them all the time.
Yeah.
But I also, think about, like, well, like I'm always like, I'm like almost trying to fact check it a little bit. I'm like, does this line up in my life?
Yeah.
How does this happen? Right. Maybe not fact check, but trying to process it.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense, right? Because so the life course perspective is a whole nother podcast all by itself. I mean, like a whole nother episode, I should say, all by itself. But its basic terms is that the beginning of life, where you are in the beginning of your life, and that trajectory is predetermined by your mom or your dad or whatever. And that if anything in that trajectory changes, then you can change the trajectory of your children. So, for example, and I'll be real quick about it, I promise. But for example, um, if my mom was born in the projects, right? So, what are my chances at that point in this life of living, to be a rich woman? That's just, an example. But so what are my chances of getting into decent schools, having proper diet, being able to develop into the person that I'm supposed to be in a loving community? Not that the projects isn't loving, because I know some really, really loving people that live in the projects. I mean, some of those communities are very, very rich because they have to take care of one another. But what I'm saying is, can you get into Harvard from the projects? You absolutely can, but are you thinking that way? Right? Because your environment dictates, what your next steps are going to be. And so anything that changes in that trajectory, like for example, my mom had my brother at the age of 16. And that's true, right? So does that change her trajectory? Absolutely, because now you're 16 years old with a baby, and your life is going to look a little different at that point, because you have to raise this son. And she was a single mom, so now she, that changes her trajectory. By the time she had me, she was married, and when she met my dad had college education. That changes my trajectory, right? So where I was born, I wasn't born in the projects, and I was born to married parents, and one of my parents had a college degree. And so that changes the trajectory, because now it's his influence on my life and his family line, their influence on my life, where they're, from the age of, I don't know, 0, they are talking about, oh, this baby is going to go to college. And so you're raised with that. So is the life course perspective is complicated, but it's a very simple thing. It's kind of like, okay, where I am today dictates where my children will be, what I will be able to provide for them. And anything can happen. It could be a tragedy. It could be a fire that takes away everything, and you have to start from scratch, and that changes the trajectory, right? So yeah, we had this discussion. I think we talked, like, I just spit that right out in less than 2 minutes. But Nicole and I talked about it for a good hour, and I was able to pull up slides and, all kind of things, because we talked about it in grad school. In my program, we talked about it in grad school. So I had slides to talk about it, and it was a major conversation when I worked at the March of Dimes. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
And I think about that with the Christian Jaden Project, because if we learned, so you have this and you've never talked about, right? You've never talked about child loss in your family. And then you get to a point where you talk about it, that changes your trajectory, right?
Right.
So I think, um, so I think about a couple of things. One, my grandmother, she lost two babies, and we never talked about it.
Yeah.
Never talked about it, right? And to the point where maybe last year or the year before, I can't remember, I'm walking through the cemetery with my mom trying to find the baby's headstones.
Yeah.
And we can't find them because people stopped talking about them,
Yeah.
and therefore no one knows where they are. And we couldn't find them. I mean, it was one of the things I think about. I didn't think about it then, but I think about it now, was how overgrown the grass was there.
Right. And no
So,
one taking care of the markers or anything.
and I thought of that so the grass was so overgrown there, but it was the infant section of the cemetery. So back in the
Wow.
day, they put all the infants in this particular cemetery. I don't know if this is like happened everywhere, but they were all in this one section. And it was overgrown because no one's taking care of the stones there, which is like, be able to see that no one's talking about this, right?
Right.
Um, my mother, part of her grief and of my grandmother passing, was her feeling like she had to find these babies.
Yeah.
So I'm walking through it with her, and we're trying to find them, right? And we did, and my mother, she felt really bad about that. But then I also think that I was premature. So
Mm.
my grandmother, she lost two babies. My grandmother is not even didn't even have a high school education.
Mhm.
Neither did my grandfather. My mother has a college education,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
still the like she had a lot of life was happening there, and I was still premature.
Right.
And then, when I gave birth, pregnancy was hard. I tell people that all, like, people were like, no, I was in no way prepared. I was just mad at everyone who was ever pregnant before me. Like, why didn't you tell me? Like,
Right.
everyone talked
True.
about the birth. No one talked about the
Yeah.
work that
Yeah.
led up to that. You named it. It was happening in my pregnancy. It was hard.
Yeah. Have a baby, they said. It'll be fun.
Fine.
Ah.
No, it wasn't, but I couldn't even process. So no one, my mom was like, she just kind of mentioned like a different place in my life. Oh yeah, you were premature, yeah, whatever. And my grandmother, we never talked about the loss at all. And I'm like, if we would have talked about that, maybe the first time I
Mhm.
went to the doctor and
Mhm.
I was like, this hurts, or I'm not feeling well,
Mhm.
I would have had different conversations. Maybe I would have been able to, maybe I would have known to get another doctor or go to a different hospital,
Right.
because that pregnancy in no way needed to be that hard.
Mhm.
And, and I think, but, my daughter was fine. She was a little early. They won't label her premature, but she was not even a pound off. Like, I had to go buy her new clothes and new diapers. She was so small when she was born.
Oh.
And she's fine. She's perfectly healthy, and she always has been. Just,
Amen.
but like, even I remember the doctor said the baby's not coming, and I'm like, that was Tuesday. It became Friday,
Right.
because I could feel everything happening in my body, and I'm so thankful that that the outcome was well for me. But
Yeah.
if we were talking about it, would
Exactly.
it, would it have been different?
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, do you think about that for your daughter?
I think about it all the time because it wasn't until after my cousins in Youngstown saw me on the news. Some of the work that I was doing led me to Youngstown, and because we worked with the health department there, some of my cousins would then say, "Oh, I didn't know that, I lost some babies," and I'm like, "These are my mother's first cousins, so you know, I need y'all generation to get it together. I need y'all to have some conversations with us because I'm thinking that this is not an issue in my community. Certainly not in my family because I never heard of it, and I'm devastated now because if we had talked about it, if we had normalized talking about women's issues within the family instead of hiding everything, I think we all would be a little bit more prepared, especially when it comes to our bodies, especially when it comes to pregnancy and sex. We need to have these conversations, right? So I come into pregnancy blind. Ethan is now, he's 20 now, and he was a healthy pregnancy. He was overdue. I was like, please get this baby out of me. So I didn't think that there could ever be an issue, even though I had twins, like I just never thought that it could be an issue because nobody ever said, hey, this could be an issue. And, I can't rely on the doctors to tell me that, because as it would turn out, they should have said, hey, you walked in here as a Black woman and pregnant. And so this makes you high risk automatically. That would have ding, 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 ding. What did you just say? And why? Why is that? I mean, it's a different conversation starter, but I can't rely on the doctors to treat me as such. I need my family to say things, right? And so with my daughter now, to answer your question, yes, I think about it all the time with Cameron, but we talk so very openly in this house about Christian and Jaden that my twins know who they are. And so, and not just for daughters, but for sons too, they play a very, very important part in the childbirthing experience, right? So, and shoot, you only need 5 minutes with Ron to know that it's true, right? To know that, he says out of his mouth, the first time around, I was kind of quiet, like they'll take care of this. But after losing, he was like, no, wait a minute, doc, because she told me last week that she felt this twinge. It's like, sir, when you become this active, first of all. And so our boys need to know as much about this stuff as our girls do. So both twins, they our pictures are everywhere. So they know who Christian and Jaden are. They participate in the Wave of Light every year with us. They light the candles with us. They take excellent care of their bears. We have these bears that I wonder, I can't remember where. I'll get the website for you guys at a later time, or if I can get Ethan to put it up on the screen a little bit later so you can see. But we got bears, and they send them to you at the weight in which your baby was born, and they put their names on them and everything. Well, the bears sit here in the living room, and they take excellent care of them. They come by, they cover them up with their little blankets that my friend Kiana made for them. She handmade blankets for them. And, like our kids are very engaged in the grieving process, even though these twins are their older brothers, they never met them. We make sure that we are very open when we are talking about it. And it's very important. I can't stress this enough, not just for the little girls, but for the little boys too, because coming up as they become fathers, as they become more engaged in the birthing process, as I know Nicole about to be like, Sam, why did you go left foot, right? But because I always do. I think about the songs that are coming out these days, and how I can think of one song. It's slightly older now, but he's basically saying that he turned this young girl into a stoner. And it's like, really, young boys, is this what you're thinking about? Because if you turn this young woman into a stoner, who's gonna birth your babies? And do you really want your babies to come out stoned? And then you won't be able to handle them. And then we just start a whole new process that's just gonna be awful, So these are things that I want to talk to my children about, but I would hope that other people want to talk to their children about, especially the boys, because as much as we want to say that girls are independent and so on and so forth, the way the world goes around, we're always vying for that attention of those young men. So I just want to make sure that, they understand the importance of taking care of their bodies, each of them, each male, each female. So yeah, I know I just went left foot all over again, Nicole. I'm
No, no,
sorry.
no. I was thinking about that, how even just important it is for like us to start telling our sons and our boys that, hey, when she got pregnant, you got pregnant too. So it's like the
Ooh,
girl, like
child.
the woman gets pregnant and then you like then we don't even talk about this dude, right?
Mhm.
Until the delivery room.
Right, right.
Like and I think about my own pregnancy. I don't Mike did not come, to my appointments with me like every time. I I don't remember when. Like he came for the first of things, like okay,
Mhm.
this is the first appointment. I'll be there. It's the first ultrasound. I'll be there. This
Mhm.
I saw two doctors. I didn't like my first the first person I went to. So I saw a different person. So
Yeah.
for the appointment and I'm sure somewhere in between, right? But he like was not is and I would just relay everything from the appointments and be like, uh-huh. But that's not the same as being there in the room,
Right,
me,
right.
and hearing what this doctor is saying, alongside me. Or me not having it's different to have to relay that information, especially when it was bad information. So I would go, again, worst pregnancy ever. I shouldn't say that, but it was hard. I
Yeah,
was every time I came back from the doctor, I'm like, here is something else I
yeah,
gotta consider. And I would, having to relay all those things to him, it would have been very different had he heard those things on his own. I
mhm,
wonder if he would have heard something that I was not hearing, or he would have been like,
right,
why every time?
right.
Because they have to be a part of the process. And I don't think our men always know how or even understand that that's their place, right?
But it totally is, and we gotta figure out how to engage in that conversation. So we're opening up conversations about dead babies, but we also maybe have to open up the conversations about the ones that are gonna live.
Yeah. And I think you do a good job about that because and I'm always so careful not to do this when I'm writing or talking about Christian Jada, is that we're talking about families and you're not talking about women. I think that's such
Yeah.
a defining thing about CJP, that when we talk about, reproduction, we're always talking about women's bodies. And
Mm,
I am not in any way taking any attention, from, reproductive rights or a woman's body. But what we're really talking about in grief, we're talking about the entire family. And
right.
it's the mother, it's the father, it's the children that were there, it's everybody who was in their ecosystem of support that are affected. Your mom was so supportive of you, during your loss, right? I remember you telling her that, she really took care of you, she really took care of Ethan
Yeah.
during that
Yeah.
time. And so she was affected by this as well, and also needs some support, right?
Yeah. That's right.
And you never put it on the woman. You never say it's just the woman's issue,
Mhm.
or it's just the woman that's screaming or that needs support. You always make sure that you take it to the entire family.
Because the entire family is affected. It's like I brought this up many a times during other meetings, like when I worked at the March of Dimes, like who's taking care of the grandparents? Because I tell you what, if my baby loses a baby, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that my baby is okay. You never stop being a mom, right? Or you never stop being a dad. So when I showed up in Florida and right after the loss and still wound up in the hospital, and my dad was the one coming to look for me in that hospital. Nobody could give anybody any information. They didn't know what room I was in. They couldn't give that information, yada, yada, yada. And my daddy was like, I'm gonna go find her. And I just heard him out in the hallway, just walking by, baby, hey, baby, baby. And I'm like, Dad, I'm in here, I knew I'd find you. You never stop being a dad or a mom. And so who's taking care of the grandparents during their support of their children? Because I'm telling you, my mama gave me her last dollar to make sure that I was okay. And how your light bill gonna get paid? But that's just the role that, some parents see themselves as. And we were okay, but we do have to consider everybody in the family when we talk about grief and all that has to be done as a result of grief and all around grief. So yeah. Whew, that was a lot. And we never even took any breaks. Like,
No, and I
so
don't even think we've talked about everything. I have a Christian Jaden binder. I had a file folder that wasn't adequate, so I upgraded to a binder to keep everything in.
we talk a
And
lot and we plan a lot. And I I literally upchuck everything on my mind and heart, and she just catches everything. And I really appreciate you. And no, we did not. I mean, we barely talked about a quarter of the things that we've actually discussed, but
no,
there'll
but
be other
that
times.
yeah, keep people waiting to see what we'll do next.
Yes, yes, yes. And I'll make sure to bring you back on as we get further and further along. So the Truth About Child Loss is a, generally speaking, 10 episodes per season, but we'll see what happens this season because it could go a little longer. It's just so much going on. So, and we're really excited. We just wanted to open up the season with a few updates. I wanted to introduce you to Nicole and give you a little bit more detail about the Christian Jaden Project. And because you'll be hearing so much more about CJP in these episodes coming up. I mean, we'll probably still be running our regular ads for Renegade Soul and the other companies that support us so generously. So, but we wanted to make sure that you knew who Christian Jaden Project is, and because you already know who Christian and Jaden are. So I really appreciate you guys tuning in. And I'm going to give Nicole an opportunity to say any last words or, parting ways until you shall meet her again. Nicole?
Well, I mean, I can't get off this call without saying the Christian Jaden Project is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are starting out. We have lots of plans. We have lots of, we really have this programming that we're trying to do, really trying to make sure that we are supporting families, and we really need your help to do that. So if you go to thecjp.org, you hit that donate tab. We would love for you to be one of our donors and one of our supporters. Again, all your donations are tax deductible, and we look forward to seeing you later.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Now, that's my development person because she never forgets that money. I appreciate her because because I'll agree to everything and she'll be like, did they say they were going to make a donation for your services? And I'm like, huh? Oh, here I am though, just making sure that everyone gets the help that they need. So yes, if you'd like to make a donation, please, by all means, visit our website anyway, thecjp.org. Take a look around at some of the things that we've done. Christian and Jaden in the news, you'll see links to articles and things like that. And by all means, hit the donate button and we will take your donation, any amount, and appreciate it. And it goes to, we've done scholarships, car seat programs, all these things that we didn't get to tell you about. But absolutely join us and we will tell you more over the season. And we just want to thank you so much for joining us for episode number 1. We're really excited to kick this off and we will catch you next episode. Thank you again.